The silence in the house was deafening. I could hear the clock ticking in the corner, each second dragging by like an eternity. I sat there, staring at the door through which she had just walked out, wondering if this would be the last time I ever saw her. Her absence filled the room in a way that was suffocating, like a shadow I couldn't escape from. I've always been a man who prides himself on his composure. I've never been quick to make decisions, especially when emotions are running high. But tonight, I couldn't help it. I could feel the storm building inside me, a storm I'd been ignoring for far too long. It started a few weeks ago, maybe longer. Little things, small shifts that I brushed off at first. She had been more distant lately, spending long hours at work, coming home later and later. At first, I told myself it was just stress. She'd been working on a big project, and I didn't want to nag her. But the subtle signs began to pile up, the late-night texts, the secretive phone calls, the way she would smile when she thought I wasn't looking, a smile I'd never seen before. I kept telling myself that I was overthinking it. After all, we'd been together for over a decade, and I trusted her. Or at least, I thought I did. But the cracks started to show in ways I couldn't ignore anymore. It was the night of our anniversary when things took a turn. She was acting off. She hadn't mentioned anything about celebrating, which was unusual because we always celebrated our anniversary, no matter how small. I remember asking her if she wanted to go out, but she seemed distracted, distant. She told me she had a lot on her plate, and that maybe we could do something another time. That was the first time I felt something shift. I could see it in her eyes, that flicker of guilt, or maybe fear. But I didn't say anything. I figured she'd come around. But she didn't. The next few days were a blur. She was more and more elusive, coming home late, leaving early, always with an excuse. And the worst part? She started to shut me out. It wasn't like before, when she'd come to me with her problems or share her day. Now, it was as if I were a stranger in my own house. And then, I found the message. I had been cleaning up her desk when I saw it, a message notification that had popped up on her phone. It was from someone named Jason, a name I didn't recognize. I wasn't proud of what I did next, but curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. Can't wait to see you tonight. I've missed you more than you know. I froze. I didn't know how long I sat there, staring at the screen. The world around me seemed to collapse in that moment. What was this? I had no proof, no real evidence. Maybe it was just a friendly message. Maybe they were just coworkers. But in the pit of my stomach, I knew it wasn't just that. I had felt it, the betrayal creeping in. The days that followed were filled with a strange kind of tension. I couldn't look at her the same way anymore, and she could sense it. We were both walking on eggshells, pretending things were normal when everything had changed. Every time I looked at her, I saw the guilt in her eyes, even if she wasn't saying anything. And every time I looked at my phone, I saw that message, like a scar I couldn't erase. That night, things finally came to a head. She was getting ready to go out again, as usual. I didn't even ask where she was going anymore. I knew the answer wouldn't be honest. But that night, I was done pretending. I stopped her before she could leave, standing in the doorway, blocking her way. "Where are you going?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. She sighed, rolling her eyes. "I've told you already, I'm meeting some friends. Why do you always make such a big deal out of everything?" I wasn't going to let this slide. Not tonight. "Who's Jason?" I asked. It was blunt, but I didn't care anymore. I needed to know. She froze, her hand still gripping the door handle. Her face went pale, the blood draining from her cheeks. She looked like a deer caught in headlights, but in that moment, I knew I had the upper hand. "Jason," she stammered, her voice faltering. "What are you talking about?" I didn't wait for an answer. I stepped forward, the anger and fear mixing in my chest. "The message, Lila. Don't lie to me. I know something's going on." For the first time in a long time, she looked defeated. I saw it in her eyes, that moment of weakness. The wall she had built around herself cracked, and I saw the truth. But instead of confessing, instead of trying to explain herself, she did something I didn't expect. She pushed past me, practically shoving me aside. "I'm leaving," she said, her voice cold and empty. "Don't bother trying to stop me." And just like that, she was gone. I stood there in the hallway, numb, my heart racing. The door slammed shut behind her, and I was left in the silence. For the first time, I realized that maybe I wasn't the one she had chosen. Maybe I was the one she was walking away from. I didn't know it yet, but that was the moment everything changed. and the storm that had been brewing for months was only just beginning. I tried to convince myself that it was just a bad night. Maybe the stress had gotten to both of us, or maybe she was just tired of my constant questioning. But as the days passed, the reality settled in like a heavy weight in my chest. She never came back. I waited, thinking that perhaps she just needed space. But that space turned into silence, and the silence turned into dread. For the next week, I didn't hear from her. I didn't receive a single call or message. It was like she had vanished into thin air. I kept telling myself that maybe she just needed time to think. Maybe I had pushed her too hard. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The last time I had seen her, there was no fight in her. No anger, no tears. She left without a word, just gone. That wasn't the woman I married. One night, after days of endlessly replaying every moment in my head, I finally decided I couldn't sit around waiting anymore. I had to find out what was going on. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my jacket and headed to her favorite cafe. It was the last place I knew she would go, the place we used to go to after a long day of work, just the two of us, drinking coffee and talking about life. When I walked in, I didn't see her at first. The usual crowd of regulars sat at their tables, sipping lattes and typing away on their laptops. I scanned the room, but there was no sign of her. I took a deep breath, almost turning to leave when a familiar voice called my name. I turned around to see Emma, one of the baristas who had been working at the cafe for years. She smiled at me, but there was something in her eyes that made my stomach twist. "Hey, Albert," she said, a little too cheerfully. "You're looking for Lila, right?" I nodded, my throat dry. "Yeah, have you seen her?" Emma hesitated for a moment, her eyes darting around the room before she leaned in a little closer. "I don't know if I should be the one to tell you this, but I saw her with someone the other day." My heart stopped. My mind raced as I tried to keep my composure. "Who?" I asked, the words barely escaping my lips. Emma hesitated again. "I don't know his name, but it's not the first time they've been here together. I've seen them a few times now." The room seemed to spin as her words hit me. My wife, the woman I had spent over a decade with, had been meeting someone in secret? I felt my chest tighten. It didn't make sense. Lila had always been honest with me. At least, I thought she had been. This wasn't the woman I knew. This wasn't the woman I married. I thanked Emma, though I wasn't sure why. She seemed to understand the look in my eyes and gave me a sympathetic nod. I left the cafe in a daze, my thoughts swirling. I had to know more. I had to find out everything, even if it meant tearing apart every last thread of the life I thought I understood. The next few days were a blur of endless searching, phone calls, and late-night drives. I was relentless, tracking down every lead I could find. But no matter how hard I looked, I couldn't find him, the man who had taken my place in my wife's life. And yet, there were more and more signs, more whispers, more hints that this was real. I was starting to unravel. And still, Lila hadn't come back. But the worst part was that she hadn't even tried to explain herself. No apology, no closure, no fight, just silence. And that silence felt like the loudest thing in the world. I knew I was playing with fire, but something deep inside me told me that I needed to keep going. I couldn't just sit back and let everything slip away without knowing the truth. One night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait for Lila to come back to me. I would take matters into my own hands. I had to find him. It was a Tuesday evening when I finally decided to act. I couldn't keep sitting in the same stagnant pool of unanswered questions. Every corner of the house felt like it was closing in on me, and I could hear the echoes of Lila's absence in every room. I had spent days piecing together every fragment of information I had about her secret meetings. Emma, the barista at the cafe, had mentioned that Lila and this mystery man often met in places she had never mentioned to me. It was maddening to think about how easily she had been able to slip away from me without a trace. I had always thought I knew her, knew every little detail of her life. But now, I was starting to wonder if I had been living in a lie. I'd gone through her things, yes, and I knew it was wrong, but desperation clouded my judgment. There was nothing concrete, just small signs, texts, phone numbers I didn't recognize, a change in her routine. It wasn't enough to confront her with. But it was enough to fuel my obsession. And it was all building up to one single truth. I needed to find him. So, I decided to stake out the one place that might hold the answers, her office. I had no idea what I would find, but I had to see for myself. I parked down the street from the building, the lights of the city blurring together as I sat there, watching. Hours passed. I kept telling myself I was being ridiculous, that maybe I was just chasing shadows. But every time I looked at my phone, I remembered the messages, the lies, and the hollow silence she had left in her wake. I wasn't going to just sit around any longer. I needed closure. Around midnight, I saw her. It was subtle at first, just a shadow moving past the windows of the office building. My heart jumped in my chest, and I tried to steady my breathing. She was there, just as I had hoped, but not alone. A man stepped into view, walking alongside her. I could see his face clearly, even from the distance. Dark hair, tall, wearing a leather jacket. My breath caught in my throat when I realized I didn't recognize him. I waited. My hands were trembling, not from the cold, but from the mounting anxiety. What was going on? Why was she with him? And why hadn't she come home? They walked down the street together, their body language telling a story that sent a chill down my spine. They were too comfortable around each other, laughing as if they shared some private joke. Lila's smile, that smile, it wasn't for me anymore. I couldn't tear my eyes away. I followed them from a distance, unable to stop myself. The streets were quieter now, the noise of the city fading into the background. They reached a car, and without hesitation, she got in. The man followed her, slipping into the passenger seat. My heart was pounding. I was frozen in place, my mind racing with 1,000 questions. Should I follow them? Should I confront them right then and there? But part of me knew that doing that would be the biggest mistake of all. I wasn't ready to face what I might learn. So I did nothing. I watched them drive away, my thoughts swirling. What had just happened? I knew I had to follow them, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Not yet. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, what answer I even wanted. But I knew one thing for sure. Lila was hiding something. And the more I uncovered, the more I realized that the truth I was looking for might be far darker than I was prepared for. The next few days dragged on like an endless nightmare. Every time I tried to sleep, I saw their faces, her smiling, his hand on her back, the way they looked at each other like no one else existed. And the questions gnawed at me. Why hadn't she come home? Why hadn't she told me? How long had this been going on? I couldn't just leave it alone. I needed more answers, and I couldn't stop until I had them. I was like a man possessed, chasing shadows and clues like they were the only thing keeping me sane. But what if, in the end, I didn't want to know the truth? What if it was better to live in ignorance than face the reality of what she had done? Would I be able to handle it? I had no choice now. I had already crossed the point of no return. The storm was coming, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. And with every passing day, it felt like the walls were closing and even tighter. The following day, I could barely focus on anything. My mind kept replaying the scene from last night, her walking with him, the easy laughter, the way they seemed so familiar with each other. It ate away at me. It didn't make sense. Lila was my wife, my partner. We had a life together, a history, or so I thought. I spent the morning going over every detail in my mind. I couldn't shake the image of them in the car, her hair falling over her shoulder as she leaned back, relaxed, as if this was the most normal thing in the world. The rage that had been building inside me the night before was now fully realized. But with the anger came something else, a sharp, gnawing fear. Fear that I might lose her forever. But what really haunted me wasn't just the betrayal. It was the feeling that I had missed something for so long. How had I let it go on for this long without seeing it? How had I been so blind? The more I thought about it, the more the pieces didn't fit. There were moments, small, seemingly insignificant things, that I had brushed off over the years. The late nights, the sudden need for space, the way she'd become distant without any explanation. I had ignored all of it, and now it was coming back to haunt me. I had to know more. I had to confront her. But I couldn't do it the same way I had before. I couldn't just accuse her of something without knowing the whole story. This time, I would have proof. This time, I would catch her in the act. I spent the rest of the day waiting for the right moment. My phone felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket, but I resisted the urge to call her. I didn't want to seem desperate, even though I was. I didn't want to give her the chance to brush me off, to lie her way out of it. That night, after I had made sure she was home, I took a deep breath and slipped out the door. I knew she'd be asleep by now, or at least I hoped she would be. The house was quiet, too quiet. As I stepped into the car and drove toward the address I had found, the knot in my stomach tightened. I wasn't sure what I was hoping to find, but I knew that I couldn't keep living like this, in the dark, wondering. I pulled up to the address about 20 minutes later. It was a small, nondescript building on the edge of town, tucked away behind a row of old apartments. It didn't look like much. In fact, if I hadn't been following her, I wouldn't have even noticed it. But there it was, the place where she had been meeting him. I sat in my car for a moment, looking at the building. It was dark, the only light coming from a street lamp at the corner. My heart pounded in my chest. What if I was wrong? What if I was just jumping to conclusions? But then, I remembered the way she looked when she walked out of the house, the way she hadn't even tried to explain herself. There was no turning back now. I stepped out of the car and walked toward the entrance, keeping to the shadows. I tried to steady my breathing, but the closer I got, the more the fear took hold. What if she saw me? What if I wasn't ready for what I might find? The door to the building creaked open as I got closer, and I paused. Someone had just entered. My pulse quickened. I waited for a moment, watching. I was afraid to move, afraid to breathe, but I had to know. I had to see. And then, I saw them. Lila was standing at the door, talking to someone. It wasn't him, though. It was another man. He was tall, with messy blonde hair and a grin that sent a chill down my spine. They were talking in low voices, too quietly for me to hear from where I stood, but the way they were standing close to each other, the way he touched her arm, it made my stomach twist. I felt a flash of anger, a burst of adrenaline. What the hell was going on? I didn't want to move closer. I was already too far gone, too close to the edge. But something inside me made me take one step forward, just enough to see her face. To see the way she smiled at him. It wasn't the smile I knew, the one she had saved for me. It was different, warmer, more intimate. And then it hit me. This wasn't just an affair. It wasn't some fling. This was something deeper. Something that had been building for a while. My mind raced as the pieces of the puzzle started to fall into place. The late nights, the odd behavior, the distance between us. It wasn't just a mistake or something that could be fixed with a few words. This was real. This was betrayal on a level I hadn't prepared for. I wanted to run. I wanted to shout, to confront her right then and there. But something inside me held me back. I couldn't reveal myself now. Not yet. I needed to know everything. I watched as Lila and the man entered the building together, the door closing behind them with a soft thud. I stayed there, in the shadows, too stunned to move. The world felt like it was spinning out of control, and all I could do was stand there, helpless. I wasn't sure what I was going to do next. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to stop until I knew the truth. Whatever it took. Even if it destroyed everything I thought I knew about her. I stayed there for what felt like an eternity. The cold night air made me shiver, but I couldn't move. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the door, from the scene that had just unfolded. Lila, my wife, had walked into that building with him. A man I didn't recognize, a man she'd been hiding from me. The reality of it hit me like a ton of bricks. But the strangest thing? I wasn't as angry as I thought I'd be. It wasn't rage that flooded my veins. It was disbelief. How had it come to this? For the next few hours, I sat there, my mind spinning. Part of me wanted to run in there, to drag her out and demand the truth. But another part of me knew that this was bigger than just a confrontation. I had to understand everything. I had to see what she was doing, who this man was, and how far their connection really went. Finally, after what felt like the longest wait of my life, the door opened again. This time it was her. Lila stepped out first, the same man following behind her. They were talking in low voices, laughing together like old friends. Or maybe more. The way they looked at each other made my stomach churn. It was the kind of look I hadn't seen between us in years. They paused just outside the door. I could see her smile, the way she leaned in as he whispered something in her ear. She didn't pull away. She didn't even seem to notice how much it hurt to watch. I knew then that I wasn't just dealing with a betrayal. This was something far worse. I followed them again, keeping my distance. I wasn't sure what I was hoping for, to catch her in the act, to hear something that would give me the courage to confront her once and for all. But I wasn't prepared for what happened next. They stopped at a nearby car, but this time, she didn't get in. Instead, she leaned into the man, kissing him. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. I hadn't expected this. I hadn't expected this level of intimacy. It was real. They were more than just friends. More than just a brief affair. I wanted to scream, to demand answers. But I stayed hidden, rooted to the ground, unable to move. What did it all mean? How long had this been going on? And more importantly, how long had she been lying to me? As they pulled away from each other, Lila got into the car, and the man climbed into the driver's seat. Without another word, they drove off into the night, leaving me standing in the dark, my mind reeling. I knew I couldn't follow them anymore. I couldn't let myself be that man. But I also knew that everything had just changed. I didn't want to believe it, but there was no denying it now. My wife, the woman I had loved, had moved on. She was with someone else. I walked back to my car in a daze, the gravity of the situation settling over me. The last few hours had felt like a dream, a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. But as I drove home, a new feeling began to creep in, a sense of finality. Whatever this was, it was over. I parked the car in front of the house, staring at the front door. The house we had shared, the life we had built, seemed so distant now. She hadn't come home. She had chosen him. And as I sat there, I realized something even more unsettling. I had no idea what to do next. What was I supposed to say when she finally came back? Would she even come back? Did I even want her to? I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. The truth was out. And now, I was left to face the wreckage of everything I thought I knew. The next day, I sat at home staring at the same four walls that had once been so comforting. The weight of what I had seen the night before didn't feel any lighter. It was like a knot in my chest that I couldn't untangle, no matter how hard I tried. She hadn't come home. I didn't know where she was, and a part of me wondered if she even cared enough to come back. I spent the morning pacing, my mind running in circles, unable to settle on anything. Should I confront her? Should I go to her work, find out more about this man? Or should I just let it go, let her make her own decisions? I didn't have answers. I just had the painful certainty that everything between us had shifted, and I wasn't sure I could get it back. By mid-afternoon, I couldn't stand the waiting anymore. I needed to talk to someone. But who? My friends? No, that wasn't an option. I'd never been one to share personal issues with anyone, especially not something this raw. But maybe, just maybe, Emma could help. She had given me the first clue. After all, the first piece of the puzzle. Perhaps she could shed more light on what was happening, on who this man was. I drove to the cafe where Emma worked, the same place where I had seen Lila just a few weeks ago, before everything started unraveling. The familiarity of it felt strange now. The buzz of conversation, the clink of coffee cups, it all seemed so distant from what I was going through. But I couldn't ignore the fact that Emma had been there when it all started. She knew more than anyone else, and right now, I was desperate for any kind of answer. When I walked in, she was behind the counter, serving a couple of regulars. She looked up and saw me immediately. Her eyes softened when she saw the look on my face. She knew. She must have known something was wrong. "Albert," she said, her voice a little quieter than usual. "What's going on? You look different." I swallowed hard. The words felt stuck in my throat. I wasn't sure where to begin, but I knew I couldn't hide it any longer. "It's Lila," I said, my voice betraying me. I think she's seeing someone else." Emma didn't flinch, but I saw the way her expression shifted. Her hand paused mid-motion, a coffee cup still hovering in the air as she looked at me, her gaze searching mine. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I didn't want to be the one to tell you this, but I think you already know." "What do you mean?" I asked, feeling the knot in my stomach tighten again. I could feel my pulse quickening. "I've seen them," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Lila and the guy, they've been coming here together for weeks. Sometimes they sit at the back, acting like no one's watching. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to hurt you, Albert." I could feel the anger rising, but it wasn't directed at Emma. It was directed at the situation, at Lila, at everything. She had been meeting him in secret, hiding it so well, so effortlessly, and I had been blind to it. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice shaking. I needed to know. I had to know who this man was. Emma hesitated, glancing around the cafe as if she was afraid someone might overhear. "His name is Thomas. He's a regular customer here. Comes in every Wednesday and Friday. He and Lila started talking about 3 months ago. I didn't think much of it at first, but after a while, I could see the way they looked at each other. It wasn't just friendly. It was more than that." I stood there, stunned, as her words sank in. 3 months. That's how long this had been going on. It made sense now, the way Lila had been pulling away, the way her behavior had changed. She had already made her choice, and I was the one left in the dust. "I don't know what to do, Emma," I admitted, my voice cracking. "I don't know how to fix this. I don't know if I even want it anymore." Emma gave me a sympathetic look, one that almost made me break down. Albert, sometimes, things change. People change. And as hard as it is, sometimes we have to accept it. You can't force someone to love you, especially when their heart is somewhere else. I could feel the weight of her words pressing on me, suffocating me. But I knew she was right. I had been holding on to a version of Lila that didn't exist anymore. And no matter how much I wanted to pretend that things could go back to the way they were, I knew that wasn't possible. I thanked Emma quietly and left the cafe, the finality of the conversation settling over me like a heavy cloak. I was alone, completely alone, and the realization hit harder than I ever expected. The man who had walked into the cafe just a few weeks ago, the man Lila had met and connected with, was now the center of her world. And I was no longer part of that world. I didn't know what came next. I didn't know how I would face Lila when she came home. But one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let this silence define me. I would find out everything, even if it destroyed me. The truth was the only thing that mattered now. The days dragged on, but the weight of what I knew didn't lift. Lila still hadn't come home, and each moment of silence between us felt like it was pushing us farther apart. I wasn't sure how much longer I could pretend I didn't know. The quiet in our house was suffocating, and I couldn't ignore the truth anymore. I had been patient, maybe too patient. I kept telling myself that maybe Lila just needed time to think. But that time never came. I had spent days looking at the door, waiting for her to walk through it, for her to come home and say that everything was a mistake. That's what I wanted, right? For her to say that she was sorry, that she loved me, that we could go back to the way things were. But I knew deep down that wasn't going to happen. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I wasn't going to wait for her to come to me anymore. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I couldn't keep living like this, in this purgatory of not knowing. I'd been avoiding calling her, but today, something inside me snapped. I picked up the phone, my hands shaking, and dialed her number. I waited, hearing the line ring on the other end. My heart thudded in my chest. She picked up on the fourth ring. "Albert," she said, her voice flat, almost tired. I felt a surge of anger, but I held it back. I didn't want to come off as desperate, but I needed to know. "Where are you, Lila? Why haven't you come home?" I asked, my voice low but firm. There was a pause on the other end of the line, too long to be comfortable. I'm staying with a friend," she said, the words distant. "I need some space." Space. Was that really all she had to say? I could feel the resentment building inside me. "Don't lie to me," I said, my voice rising slightly. "I saw you. With him. I know what's going on." The silence on the other end of the line stretched out for what felt like an eternity. I could hear her breathing, slow and measured. Then, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Albert, I don't think we should talk about this right now." I could feel my blood pressure rising. "Oh, really? And when would be the right time, Lila?" "When you've had enough time to finish whatever it is you're doing with him." She didn't respond at first, but I could feel the tension building. Finally, she spoke again, her words slow, deliberate. "I'm sorry, Albert. I never meant for any of this to happen. But I'm not coming home. I don't want to be with you anymore." The words hit me like a slap in the face. I could hardly breathe. I never imagined it would end like this, with her so cold, so detached. "Is he that important to you?" I asked, my voice shaking despite my best efforts to stay calm. "Yes," she replied simply. I couldn't hold back the anger anymore. "I gave you everything. And this is how you repay me?" "I never wanted to hurt you," she said, her voice breaking. "But I can't keep living a lie. I'm sorry, Albert. I really am." I didn't know what to say after that. I just stood there, the phone pressed to my ear, my mind reeling. I didn't know if I wanted to scream, cry, or just hang up and pretend this had all been some awful nightmare. But the reality was there, staring me in the face. I took a deep breath, my throat tight. "I hope you're happy, Lila. I hope this is what you really want." She didn't respond, and I knew she wouldn't. I heard the faint sound of her breathing on the other end before the call ended. I stood there in silence, staring at the phone. My hand trembled as I slowly lowered it. It was over. But even as the words echoed in my mind, something inside me still clung to hope. Maybe, just maybe, she would come back. Maybe this wasn't the end, after all. But deep down I knew it was. Days passed, and the weight of the silence began to lift, but not in the way I had expected. I didn't know how to move forward, how to rebuild my life when everything I thought I knew had fallen apart. But what I didn't realize at the time was that it wasn't just about surviving the aftermath. It was about learning how to thrive again, despite everything that had happened. I spent a lot of time reflecting on what had gone wrong. I replayed every moment in my head, wondering if there was something I had missed. The truth was, there had been signs all along. Maybe I had been too afraid to see them. But now, with the weight of the truth finally settled, I could accept that our relationship wasn't meant to last. And while that was a painful realization, it was also freeing. Lila and I never spoke again after that phone call. I tried reaching out a few times, but she never responded. She was gone, and I had to accept that. In a strange way, I began to feel a sense of relief. I had spent so much of my energy holding on to someone who had already let go. And once I stopped fighting it, I felt like a weight had been lifted from my chest. The weeks after Lila's departure were difficult, of course. There were moments when I doubted myself, when I questioned my worth. But I didn't allow myself to stay in that place for long. I spent time with friends, rediscovered old hobbies, and found solace in the simple pleasures that had been buried under the chaos of my marriage. It wasn't about moving on immediately. It was about healing, about finding peace within myself. One evening, a few months later, I found myself at a small art gallery downtown. It was a place I used to visit with Lila, but I hadn't been there since everything fell apart. As I wandered through the rooms, I felt a strange sense of calm. The artwork, the quiet atmosphere. It felt like a place where I could breathe again. And then, I saw her. It was Emma, the same barista from the cafe. The one who had helped me see the truth when I had no idea what was really going on. She was standing in front of a painting, her expression thoughtful, lost in the colors and shapes. When she turned around and saw me, her eyes widened in surprise. "Albert," she said, her voice warm. "I didn't expect to see you here." I smiled, feeling a spark of something new. "I needed to get out," I said. "It's been a while." We talked for a while, catching up. Emma told me she had started doing freelance photography, something she had always wanted to do. As we chatted, I felt something shift inside me. There was no pressure, no expectations. It was just two people, enjoying the moment. Before I left, Emma asked if I wanted to grab coffee sometime. I agreed without hesitation, realizing how much I had missed the simplicity of connection. As I walked away from the gallery that night, I felt a sense of hope that I hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe it wasn't just the end of something. Maybe it was the beginning of something new. Life had a funny way of surprising you. The pain I had gone through, the heartache and the confusion, had led me here, to a place where I could stand tall again, where I could find joy in the little things. And even though the past would always be a part of me, I was finally ready to let it go and embrace what was ahead. Things weren't perfect, and I didn't expect them to be. But I was learning to trust again, not just in others, but in myself. And that, in the end, was the greatest gift I could give myself. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I was okay with that.